Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemeyer Games. I'm coming to you from the future of when we filmed the video that you're about to watch. Mitchell and I filmed this video and it went longer than expected. Mitchell has a lot of interesting things to say, and we talked about a lot of different topics in terms of why isn't this in every game? And so we decided to cut the video into two parts, and we didn't decide this into the future. So if you're joining me now, there is a part one of this video that already exists where Mitchell and I talked about uh, a number of topics about why certain things aren't in every game. And now we're going to continue that conversation about why certain things aren't in every game with the final few topics that he and I wanted to cover. So there should be another maybe 40, 45 minutes in the video that you're about to watch. I hope you enjoy. Thanks. All right, let's talk about, well, speaking of going long, let's talk about longevity, a game's
Yes.
longevity. And there's a couple different things I built in this category. Like, for example, why isn't everything double-sided, whether it's
Yes.
for variability or like double-sided score pads, score sheets, having multiple maps, having different versions of player map, like having one faction on one side of the player mat, a different faction on the other side of the player mat. And in terms of score sheets, why not just have whiteboard instead of score sheets at all?
Oh,
Um, yeah.
that's
So yeah,
interesting.
what are your thoughts on longevity? I mean, I didn't really build in replayability in this category, but that does
Right.
that does go into player mats that have two different factions. So yeah, what are your thoughts
Right.
on this?
Um, I really it's I more is always better if you're playing, especially when you get your game.
Uh-huh.
To have more options, especially when I think of, map tiles. I'm usually thinking of something in the dungeon crawl slash adventure game area.
Yeah.
And I always get excited when I look at a map tile and I flip it over. There's one time, on one side, there's that rugged terrain in the forest. And I flip it over and it looks like the ice planet Hoth. I mean, you can see
Mm,
like their little glaciers and stuff. So I was like, oh, not only is that really cool that I flip them over, but it lets me know there are different environments here. I have
yeah.
different opportunities to have different experiences here. And yes, and this is something I made for myself, but I'm going back on what I thought here from my little notes here. I'm like, okay, you could have a bunch of tiles put in there. And I thought, well, if they're double sided, that means you're stuck with using that one side. But if you're playing a forest map for
Mhm.
this particular adventure, the forest side can all be on one side, and the ice map, the others, it can all be on the other side. So there are ways of making these map tiles more useful, obviously by having them double sided. I'm a huge fan of that. Again, I don't know logistically how hard it is to do that. I do know that making more tiles
Mhm.
probably definitely costs more money, uses more resources, and stacks up the game lid higher, or will make the game
It does.
deeper because you have to put more of these tiles in there.
Yeah.
Um, I also I also wanted to give a little shout out to, and I know this is going to sound a little bizarre. Um, what was it, Merchants of Magic, the Rock Manor
Yes.
game, which is sort of set
Right.
in the Set a Watch universe. And by the
Mhm.
way, again, this game packs some really cool components into a small box. It's a roll and write game about it's kind of similar a little bit to Merchants of the Dark Road, where you are the merchants making stuff for adventurers, and you're using the dice to not only create your different things to sell to people that are coming into your store to go out on adventures, but you're also enchanting items with those same dice. And people are, as with most roll and writes, they're using those same dice to decide what they're going to do. Has great components, and the thing that I love that they did, talk about dual sided maps, they give you a huge amount of the sheets for the game. You see the sheet right in
Mhm.
the middle that Jamie, the picture he put up, but they're
Uh-huh.
also double sided. And I don't see a
Yeah.
lot of double sided score pads when it comes to roll and writes. I haven't seen that
Yeah.
a lot. I know people do it, but Merchants of Magic did it along with a ton of paper and in a beautiful Deluxified. Look at those dice. They're beautiful. So yeah, I think having the double sided is fantastic. It just gives you a varied experience. It lets people know there's a lot more adventure in that box.
Mhm.
But from your perspective, oh yeah, look at those. I've seen those too. Um, what is the challenge of doing double sided? And again, is it something that you think is worth the cost, or I mean, or do you wait to put out more tiles later on? What is, from your point of view, what do you think of the dual sided map tiles? So where do you stand, Jamie, on dual sided map tiles? Hard news today.
Well, yeah, this is between two castles, which is a good way to look at this from two
Yes,
different perspectives. One is the score pad, and between two castles, I am 99% sure, because I think we almost always do this, that each of these pages is printed double-sided for the reason of longevity, so that you have
right.
two games out of a single sheet of paper instead of one. That to me, it's a very low amount of cost. I think it is maybe a no-brainer thing to do. And you can even do it like if you have 100 pages in the score pad, but you really only need 50, you don't think anyone's going to play over 100 times, you could just literally have that book. You can make it twice, half as tall, and print the pages on either side instead of
Right.
just on one side. That ties into the whiteboard element a little bit that I have heard someone say, and I see both sides of it. I see the value of having like a whiteboard score pad and that you can like refresh and use over and over again. The downside, or the slight downside, in my opinion, is that you lose that artifact from the game. I know a lot of people do their scoring on like apps now. They record their scores. But
Right.
every now and then when I dig into my copy of Between Two Castles, it is kind of neat to go back and look at,
Oh yeah.
oh, I scored, or someone scored this. If they put their name on it or not, they scored 100 points in the last game. That's pretty cool. I in some games, I like having that artifact. So I think that is a reason to consider having a score pad versus the whiteboard, even though they
Right.
have pros and cons.
I know people that
Yeah.
save those scores and would
Yeah.
use it against you. Yes, you remember
Right.
this? No, stop it. Take that away.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm going to show you to shame you. No, but it's great. I actually do that too, and I'll keep them in the box. Not games that I've
Mhm.
won, even just because it's a great memory of like who was there with you, who was at the
Yes.
table with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And again, that visual will almost brings back the whole memory of that evening. The fun that you had
Right.
sort of washes back over you. So I think that's really cool too. So yeah, the whiteboard is really cool for the long term, but it's
Right.
nice to see everything sort of organized on there, the lines, the grid, the different categories sometimes, because some of them have multiple categories that are really hard to
Yeah.
grid out on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Logistically, that would be hard to do for some games, depending on how complex the scoring is.
Right.
But yeah, I love that game too. It's a great game.
The flip side, you were talking about tiles in a game. Why aren't more tiles double
Yes,
sided?
yes,
And I'm going to leave Between Two Castles up here because obviously we did not make most of the tiles double sided, and I
right,
think the reason is often randomization. It's harder to randomize something that where you have important information on both sides that players feel like they could get an advantage from seeing what's on the backside. So even in the example you gave of having like an ice planet on one side and a forest planet on the other side of a tile, some players might feel like, okay, I know what this art looks like. From that art, I know what's on the other side of the tile. I'm going to have
right.
an advantage because I played this game many times over other players. I think it's
Yeah, yeah.
overplayed to do that because you can put tiles in bags. You can draw from the bottom of the stack. You can shuffle under the table. I think there are ways around it, around that problem. Go
I
ahead.
agree, and I was talking more from the perspective of, I think I might have misspoken because I was thinking more of the perspective of like building a dungeon or building,
Mm-hmm.
something in an adventure game where you have map
Yeah.
tiles, grids, where you're not, if you're having a game that has, like you said, where you have a stack and you're turning them over, absolutely. Any game with a
Yeah.
fog of war, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where you can't see that side. I was looking at it from a different side of, oh,
Uh-huh.
if we're having map tiles for my adventure or my RPG game, it would be great to double them up. So at least you have more utility out of them. But yeah, it's actually good that we're talking about both because again, different use
Yeah.
cases. One would require only printing on one side, or else you'd spoil the game. Or like you said,
Right.
competitive advantage, not good. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We're looking at it from two totally different sides. That's good.
And the other side of that too is for asymmetry. If I have a player mat that has a faction on one side or a character on one side, why not have a different one on the backside? Some people asked me this about expeditions when expeditions came out. They said, "Why don't you have instead of giving us 5 mechs, why don't you give us 10 mechs essentially, and we can reuse the miniatures for each side of the map?" And I was like,
Right, right.
"Yes, that would be awesome. I agree." But I only designed 5 of them. Like I only had, I only had 5 ideas that I thought could work that tested. I had more ideas than that, but I cut a bunch of them because they didn't work as well. And
Right.
so I think part of that comes down to the talent of the designer to design asymmetric elements. And if I'd rather have the 5 best ones
I was going to
than
5 strong and
5
watered
that
down.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
I get that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to finish your sentence, but no, now that you say that, I totally get that. And that applies to more than just board games. It's like
yeah,
quality over quantity. It's like, do you want
exactly.
5 really great ones, or do you want 5 really great ones? And 5 others like, yeah, the mech with
Yeah.
the cape didn't work for me, or the mech with the glasses was basically that same guy with glasses on, Clark Kent and Superman. That doesn't work for me. So yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah. So that is longevity, where we show Between Two Castles and Merchants of Magic. Let's go on to accessibility, a big category here. Why don't all games have a solo mode? Why don't all games have suggestions for new or younger players? We kind of talked about this a little bit in terms of complexity.
Right.
Why don't all games have dual coding for colorblind players or for low lighting situations? Why don't all games have player aids or reference cards for every player opposed to just like one that
Don't
you
get
put on
me
the
started.
table?
Yeah.
And someone mentioned this actually in the video last week. Why don't all games have on those reference cards? Why don't all games have page numbers that reference the rule book so that you can quickly go to
Oh,
the rule book
wow.
for a full explanation? We haven't done that. I think that's a great comment. I'm
Great
glad that's in the
idea.
video, and I will consider
Yep.
that for the future. There's no reason not to do that other than I didn't think of it, like I said at the
Right.
beginning of the video.
Right.
So yeah, accessibility. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, let's start from the back end, Jamie. Let's talk about there's no reason for it. You haven't seen me get too crusty about much in this video because it's been all fun and games. But now, okay, so not every game, not even every Stonemeyer game, and that's okay. I don't have an issue with this. Not every game has player reference cards. I
Yeah.
happen to like them, especially if I'm teaching a game and there's a round structure, there's a turn order, and the order is very specific. The order in which we do things is very, it's important that you move before you take your action. Having that card, especially when you're teaching other people, becomes an important aspect. So I don't begrudge people or, designers and publishers that don't have, the reference cards, although I wish every game did. It's not a big deal. The problem I have, and you're going to laugh, and I can't wait to hear your answer. I think I know the answer is going to be, I can't understand why you'll have two reference cards for a game that plays up to 5 or 6. Now, if we're talking about, you talk about the mold is already made, right? We're talking about the dice. Hey, the
Yeah.
mold's already made. It's the cheapest part, the easiest thing to do. I'll always say yes to that. You've already printed up a card. You already have the template for that card. You've made 2 of them. I would gladly pay the other 39 cents for the rest of the friggin' cards. So I don't understand. And maybe you have an answer for me, but by your smile, I don't think there is an answer. If you put in
Yeah.
2, why can't you put in 5? Why can't you put in 6? If there are 8 players, go ahead, put in 8. I'll pay the 30 something cents. I really don't know what it costs, and I don't really care. But Jamie, before the top of my head comes off, is there a reason why you don't, somebody would, not you, because in the games that you do put reference cards in, you put them in for everybody.
Yeah.
Why would people only put in 1 or 2 reference cards when you've already gone through the trouble of printing 1?
There isn't a reason.
Thank you.
The
That's all I wanted.
only thing I can think of is
Okay.
if you have, say, a card sheet, and this isn't even a great reason, but if you have a card
Okay.
sheet that holds 60 cards, it's a big sheet of paper. They're going to lay out 60 cards on it, and they're going to stamp
Right.
it out. They're going to die cut it out and put it into a deck. And you have filled it up to 58 cards with, like in the Merchants of Magic, if there are 58 cards in the game, and
Right.
so you only have 2 cards left on that sheet, you could make an economic. That is the point where adding that 3rd, 4th, and 5th card actually does add a lot of money. In all other cases, it does not add much money. It really doesn't add anything because you already have the card sheet there. If you can fit it on the card sheet, it doesn't add anything extra. So there's
Yeah, but you know what? I think you
ever.
ruined my argument. You actually gave me a valid reason, and I couldn't think of one. But you're
Yeah.
right. If you're, and I was going to say, well, make a separate sheet that's just all the cards, all the reference cards, and then print them separately. But no, you're right. Again,
Yeah.
gamers, people that don't know the manufacturing process, don't think of how cards are made. That they're on a sheet, and you're trying to maximize those sheets so you're not getting more sheets and spending more money. Because again, for me, obviously joking about I'll pay the 39 cents, 39 cents here, 39 cents there. These things have a cumulative effect and add up and come in and affect the total price of a game. So even though I love all the things, and again, I'm saying this out loud for me and for everyone else, even though I love all these things that I'm asking for, and they might not be much on their own, when you add those things up, it cuts into the margins. Because as Jamie has said in his other videos where he's talked about the economics of designing a game, the margins are so slim, and people look at a retail price and go, oh, it's you. How could you not make money on this? Well, when you're selling to an online retailer like Amazon, you're selling it at a reduced price. So you have to build in a price to make sure that you're still getting a profit, even if that reduced price. So we won't go back to that, but every little bit does add up. So I can't believe you just stole my thunder. I was like, there's no reason. Jamie's going to sit there and laugh and go, Mitchell's right, everyone. But you just gave me reason, and I feel shame and despair.
Well, I'm not trying to shame you. I think it is.
No, I'm teasing.
I think it is very rare that you're even thinking about that precise nature of the card sheets, because usually you're ending up with like 75 cards, and you're not even thinking about the card. Like you have extra room on the second card sheet. And in those cases, yes, I can't. There's no good reason for it. And I have a bone to pick that I'll throw out there
Oh, yeah, go
related to
for it.
this, which is reference cards that have action checklists. So they're reference cards in Stamp Swap that have the icons on one side, and I think it's like
Okay.
the flow of the game on the other. So there's no time in the game. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, the colors and the themes on one side, and the other
Oh, yeah.
side you have the round summary.
Okay.
There's really no time that you need to see both sides of the cards simultaneously. You can flip back and forth based on what you need. You really don't need to look at this side all that often at all. It's more this side. Uh,
Right.
but in games that have action checklists, where your entire decision space in the game is which action do I choose on this turn, and half of the actions are on the back of the card, that
Ah,
I don't understand that. Just give me that's where I want either a bigger card that has, because there are different card sizes, give me a bigger card that has all the actions on one side, or give me two cards where I can look at all the actions in front of me all the time. That baffles me every time. And
right.
it's in those games when I play them where I end up taking two cards. So I'll take a reference card away from someone else who says they don't need it so that I can have all those actions in front of me.
Give me that. Yes.
Give me that, yeah.
Jamie's
I
a
don't,
card thief, everyone. He's just told you. And
yeah.
listen, in some games, there are more complex explanations for things that happen that people may need during the flow of a game. And
Yes.
that's when you have the giant sheets that will sit, on a
Yeah.
table and say, give me that reference sheet. Because let's face it, not everything is going to be like first turn draft, second turn trade, second turn spin around to touch your head. It's not
Right.
always going to be
Right.
that simple. So
Yeah.
sometimes having the giant card that is basically like the sheet out of a rule book, just with a heavier stock that sits on the table, like, let me look at this, which is more about game flow and
Yes.
questions that everyone seems to have, or that, so, those are different too. That having one of those is fine. But again, I can't believe, you gave me an explanation that actually worked. I don't like it at all. What else do we have in this category? Did we?
Well, solo mode is one thing. So I don't play a lot of
Yes,
games
yes,
solo,
yes.
but it is worth mentioning. It is something that I think a lot of people wonder now, because a lot of people have gotten into solo games. Why doesn't every game have a solo mode? And you can see here's the solo mode in Stamp Swap. It is a fairly robust solo mode. Like, this isn't just a little corner of the rule book. There are a lot of components,
Oh yeah,
and the Automa team puts a lot of time and effort into making these solo modes. And I think that is almost the answer to the question, that solo modes are not a throwaway thing to add to a game. If you're going to
no,
do it, it does take time, it takes energy, it takes expertise to do it. And not everyone has those skills. I don't have the skills to design a solo game. That's why I outsource to Automa Factory to make them.
right.
And it adds,
They
as
do a
you can
great
see here,
job too.
this
Yeah,
does add cost. Like, there are tokens, there are cards, there are multiple rule books. This is the back of the player sheets here, or the player mat. So that doesn't add cost, but
right.
yeah.
It's basically like it's mechanical AI. It's like
Yes.
physical AI that's built into here. It's like you're right, it is huge. And I
Yeah.
was always on the side of I love when games give that opportunity because you don't always have a full group to play with, or some people don't game with groups at all. They gravitate towards solo games on their own. I
Right.
don't begrudge games that don't have a solo mode because some of them are not designed for that, or they just say, that's if we get enough feedback that people want that, maybe we'll
Right.
add something in the future, which games have done before. But I love that you give people the opportunity. And as you said, at a big expense, at a cost to you for making
Right.
it, but it's great. It's also a very welcoming thing. And people, just the other night, when we were playing Fire Tower, my nephew
Mhm.
got the game and he said, you know what? A lot of my friends, I love playing with you and the family, but a lot of my friends aren't necessarily there to play. I love that this game has a solo mode. I love that I can
Mhm.
do this. And I think having that option, and listen, people don't game with groups for a lot of different reasons. Either you don't have a group, there's social anxiety, there's so many reasons to want a game solo, and sometimes just the joy of filling a puzzle by yourself. So I love that you guys do it. I understand why not every game does, but I love that all of your games have that option, and it's a wonderful thing to have.
You also mentioned, I think, spots in this category. And I was curious what you were thinking about accessibility for spots. Do
Okay.
I have that right? Yeah.
Yeah. I love what did I write down here? Because I did write this down. First of all, part of accessibility is ease of entry for me.
Yeah.
This is a game that's incredibly easy to play. Again, this is like I mentioned Zombie Dice on my list as a great gateway game. This obviously takes that push your luck. There are more things mixed in, but this is the next level after Zombie Dice with a lot more
Right.
going on, obviously, than Zombie Dice. But I like that the accessibility is there, very easy to play. Even though there are colors, it is a color neutral game in
Mhm.
terms of how the mechanisms work, in terms of the turn order. Um, I like the fact that even on the little yard card that you see there, with the little red card with the die on it, that
Yeah.
even tells you, reminds you not to go over 7.
Hmm.
It's very welcoming, very easy to start. It's very color neutral. Out of the box, it gives you options. You can scale it in different ways, much in the way you can with Quacks. So I just like the fact that it was very accessible to any audience. I like the color neutrality. The rule book's a couple of pages, very easy to go back and reference. And I like the fact that a lot of it was just based on the visuals, just the visual elements of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was an incredibly accessible game. Again, from the colorblind perspective to just the accessibility of new players, it's wonderful. And again, you got this game. I think I got the game before you did, but you started playing way before I did. I've been playing it nonstop, Jamie. I love this game. There's so much more to it. It could be much thinkier than people think it is, but still very accessible, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. It's just fun on the table. The artwork is great. So Spots is just my example of this.
One thing I'll add on to
I
that
love the game.
too
Yeah.
is with Spots, and I couldn't find a great image to show this off. Let's see if I can find one.
Am I gonna have to run
Yeah,
to my
no, I
box?
can't
It's
find
right
it.
over here. Yeah.
Yeah. We go back to longevity. There's a lot of replayability in
That's
the game because you're using different
yes.
combination of tiles. And crucially, I love that on those tiles, they just explain in words how the ability works. Because I think there seems to be a trend in gaming of trying to do that in icons to try to make it language independent. And I think that actually makes it less accessible. Can you imagine playing Spots where you had to decipher a bunch of icons for every one of those cards? It would
No.
be like maybe it's possible, but I just want to read it. I just want to read how it works and then do the thing. I know it makes it a little bit harder to read from across the table, but they're tiles. You can pick it up, you can pass it to someone, and they can read it
Right.
and see how it works. So I
I
really
agree.
appreciate Spots for doing that. I think that is an accessibility pro instead of a con.
That's what I
Yeah.
meant to say, what he said. And also,
Okay.
funny enough, they actually do use a lot of imagery with arrows
Yes.
and stuff in the rule book, which are very
Yeah.
clear. But in addition to obviously words and stuff, but they do use great images. They integrate the images well into the rule book. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I love this game, Jamie. When you were like putting it in your top games, I was like, oh, he's so right. This game is so good.
Yeah. I love Spots. Yeah. So let's see if there's anything else in that category to touch upon. We talked about colorblind friendliness and low light friendliness.
Yes.
That is a much bigger topic, so we won't go deep into it. But
Right.
key idea is that if you do have a game where colors are important, that you dual code them with some other icon or
Yes.
shape or pattern, so that you're not just relying on someone to be able to see color, because
Totally agree.
about 5% of the population can't do that, and that's among millions of gamers. That adds up.
Yeah. One of my buddies in my game group are colorblind. So in games that
Yeah.
aren't sensitive to that or aware of that, we're telling him what color that is, or it's like, man, I wish they would have made that a different shape. I'm like, yes, I wish they
Yeah.
would have made it a different shape so you would know. Just so yeah. So we're definitely aware of that because of my buddy Jack. But yes, it's important that
Yeah.
people are aware of that. Absolutely.
So that's dual coding. The last category is
Yes.
Deluxification. I know this is probably more important to you than to me, because I often on Kickstarter, I'm the person who buys like the standard version of the game, and I think you get the fancy version a lot. Maybe not always, but sometimes. But so
No, if they offer it.
So why don't all publishers at least offer the option for Deluxified components through a deluxe version, through an add-on? I guess that's the idea here. Why isn't there always a deluxe option? I think is the
Well,
core.
I have to make it clear that I'm not, so self-serving that I don't understand that obviously when it comes to deluxifying, there is a cost. There's definitely a cost, because when you start adding and deluxifying, and this is something that you've talked about in other videos, deluxifying does not have to be giant miniatures or, metal coins. Oh, I love metal coins. It can be in
Right.
deluxe resources. Oh, how'd you do that, Jamie? So there are many different ways to deluxify. And again, I don't begrudge when people, when designers and publishers aren't willing to go all in and do a completely deluxified game. I totally get that. And sometimes it doesn't take much. If there's an element of deluxification, again, if you have a game that has beautiful custom dice, which, as Jamie said, is not a very big expense to add, but it's a great way to make a game pop and differentiate, give a different tactile feel to in some cases, that's an opportunity. Whether it's, gold foiled cards, like Jamie did with Red Rising, or the stamps and Stamp Swap, There are different ways to give that feeling of, oh, give a little something, something. And this is like, I'm glad you put it. This is Merchants of the Dark Road, which is one of my favorite games, but it's also, it may be the holy grail in terms of deluxified games out of the box. Because they even, Jamie, you had the standard version and it was still super. I mean, you felt like it was still incredibly deluxified what you got, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had the gold foil on the treasure tiles. That was really beautiful. It didn't have the silk screen printing. I think that must be unique in this token. And these
in
tokens
that version,
look
it
special.
looks so good. And the dice are ridiculously cool looking. So I understand that not every game is going to have everything, but even having an element, one element of these, either the silk screen, wooden components, metal coins, again, Century Golem. You have the little plastic gems. You have the metal coins. You have an insert. And again, this is an inexpensive game. So people look at that and go, oh, why can't more games do this? And if publishers, I understand, it costs a lot of money to do this. And you don't always know. You don't always have the advantage of having a Kickstarter so you can gauge the interest up front and know what you can afford to do or not to do. Not every game published has that advantage. So how do you mitigate that? Is there a way that you can do a value added where either if you don't want to go through the expense, because again, you don't know how your game is going to hit if you don't have a Kickstarter, because you don't have the pre-sales right there, or if you're not doing a pre-sale, how is can you do a deluxe version and a standard version? Is it easier to do a deluxification kit, which a lot of people are doing now, where they'll give you the coins and the fancy dice and the realistic components separately, so you can feel like as you go along or as you have the money to do it, you could do it at your own level that's budget friendly to you? I mean, how does this work for you? Because I know, again, Stonemaier, both you and Elf Creek Games, you guys are like the standard for me in terms of putting out games that always feel deluxified, even though they're not classified as the deluxe version. So how do you feel about that? And as a gamer and as a publisher and designer?
Yeah, I mean, my goal as a publisher is that for any game of ours that you buy, when you buy and most of our games, we only have the standard version. When you buy that you feel like that it is maybe not a deluxe game, but a premium game.
Yes.
At least. And there are multiple ways to accomplish that by the insert. We talked about that earlier, having some custom components. It's almost all the categories that we talked about today, but also having something that's a little flashy. In Stamp Swap, those are the gold foil stamps.
Right.
So it's a little flashy. It stands out. It feels extra premium and extra special. And we went through the extra effort of putting them in there. So I think it's nice to do that. Then we go on to the other level of deluxified, like super deluxe versions of games, or the deluxe add-ons, those types of options. And we've tried different things at Stonemaier, like with Libertalia. There are metal coins that you can add on to the game, but in the game, we do have the special tokens that you pull out of the bag. So in every copy of Libertalia, you have the special tokens, but you have to add on the metal coins. For Expeditions, we had a metal mech version and then a plastic mech version.
Right.
And I go back and forth on which way to go, because with the add-on option, like with the metal coins, you're making a component in the game redundant. It means that you don't need the cardboard coins in Libertalia. So there's a little bit of waste there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so that's like the downside of doing that. The flip side is for like Expeditions, where we have two different versions of the game. By doing it that way, we kind of backed ourselves into a corner and made ourselves, like, every time we want to release an expansion that has more mechs, we need to make two versions of it, and we need to estimate demand for two different audiences.
Right.
That's in flux over time. So that complicates things in a different way. So
yeah. I mean, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because and again, obviously I'm not in a position to make a call on that, because I'm not the person designing, paying for, publishing, shipping, all these things. So, but I almost feel like having the option to later on is a great way to go, even though there will be some waste at the same time. Which is more wasteful? Creating a deluxified version of a component that people can buy separately and then replace theirs in their own timeline, or printing up a separate bunch, hoping that people like it as much, or printing up a small amount, gauge the interest, and then do a reprint. I don't know which is more fiscally responsible, or not make it. Again, if you're deluxifying something even on your own, there is going to be some waste, because you're now replacing a product that had perfectly good bits, even though they weren't what you want. If they were cardboard replaced by plastic. But I don't know, I almost feel like having it's it's the smarter move long term to probably have the option to Deluxify later, because then you can gauge interest for that particular product, not have to gauge interest for an entire box, where that might create more waste than just replacing one component. You know what I mean? But I love the fact that you offer two options. I think that's fantastic. But if people can't afford to do that, or if they just want to gauge the interest first, the next best thing, give people an option to Deluxify, and you will see, you'll gauge the interest, and then you'll know for next time, maybe I had enough people that were interested in the deluxe version. Maybe we'll just make these particular components included, raise the price a little bit, but know that people liked it enough to make it a worthwhile purchase. So, I guess you're right. I guess it's per incident basis, but man, I'm a sucker for those flashy bits. Man, I have to admit, I have to own it, embrace it. I'm a Deluxifier. I'm Mitchell Whitfield, and I Deluxify. So thank you for doing it, because I love, the games. Like you said, even if it's a couple of things and then you could add on later, it makes a huge difference. It makes us feel like, wow, that's something special. I haven't seen that. Those metal mechs. Ooh, and you can never keep those metal mechs in stock anyway. You got to make more all the time. More mechs.
When we are actually right now, as we're recording this, we are making. We're actually reprinting the Ironclad version of Gears of Corruption, the expansion for Expeditions, but at the same time, we're also making the metal mechs by themselves for people who just want to add them on, which I like. This goes back to accessibility too. That we're hitting two different audiences here. We're catering to early adopters who want the fanciest thing out of the gate, but we're also catering to people who want to see if they like the game first before spending all that extra money on it, which I think is really, really important. I think that's. I like that people have that choice of going all in from the beginning versus later on. And so that is, I think, in general, why maybe I lean towards the add-on element over having two different versions out of the gate. But there are circumstances where I'll probably still do that.
Yeah. And if you put them out, I will buy them. Just know that. I could buy a whole print run myself. You don't know what I'm capable of, Jamie. I'm a wild man.
I appreciate that, Mitchell. So that is our last category, Deluxification. This was awesome, Mitchell. Thank you so much for your time. I know we talked for a long time today, but I think it's a great discussion to have about why don't more games do these things. As we discovered today, oftentimes there are reasons, or at least considerations. And I'm glad you brought up cost multiple times, that whenever we add a component that costs $1 to the game, that raises the price by $5 or $6 because there's a multiple on it as we want to put these games into distribution. So that is always a factor. But I like that we're thinking about these things, and that publishers are thinking about things. People will probably add other things to this list, hopefully in a positive way in the comments. So yeah, thank you so much for having this idea and having this conversation.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being so open to doing it. And it's a great thing for us as gamers to hear, and to also know that there are human beings behind all these things, all these things that, and again, it's not just this, it's a bigger picture too. There are always human beings behind this and making thoughtful decisions. And there are reasons, whether we like them or not, there are reasons that do affect every aspect of it. So I loved your answers, and thank you so much for letting me know why my biggest pet peeve, the not enough reference cards. I may never forgive you for giving me such a good answer, but now I know. No, thank you for doing this video. I'm glad you're open to it, because I thought it would be a fun thing to do with you. And it was.
Thank you, Mitchell. Yeah. I look forward to all the comments from people who want to add to these 7 categories and let's try to keep it positive and constructive. If you have something to add, let us know a game that has that thing that you love, that you'd love to see in other games. Let me know that format, I think, would be a great way to approach the comments. Thank you, Mitchell, and thank you everyone who contributes here. Take care.